Her secret lover accidentally called me, and everything unfolded. My life seemed perfect. Lauren, the woman I had spent 5 years married to, was my world. She was always attentive, caring, and our evenings were filled with laughter and warm conversations. Every morning, as I left for work, she would kiss me and say, "Don't forget, I'm always with you." It felt genuine, so real. But here's what I learned. Sometimes, what feels real is just an illusion. That evening started like any other. Lauren mentioned she was meeting up with a friend. I stayed home, working on a project. Then suddenly, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and I usually ignored such calls, but something made me answer. "Hi, sweetheart," said a deep, confident male voice on the other end. I froze in place. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Are you sure everything will go as planned?" I stayed silent, trying to process what was happening. The voice continued. "Lauren, are you there? Lauren." My heart sank. I couldn't stay silent any longer. "I think you have the wrong number," I said. There was silence on the other end. Then a hurried, "Oh, sorry," and the call ended. I stood there with the phone in my hand. Thousands of thoughts swirled in my mind. Why had this man said my wife's name? And more importantly, what did he mean by "seeing you tomorrow"? Mark sat in his chair, gripping his phone tightly. His heart still pounded from the unexpected call. He couldn't stop thinking about the fact that this voice, this man, seemed to know something about Lauren that he didn't. This could just be a coincidence, Mark thought. But the more he tried to calm himself, the deeper he delved into memories of the past few weeks. Things used to be simpler. Lauren was always open and honest. She often shared her plans with Mark, even the smallest details. But lately, he'd noticed an invisible barrier growing between them. The first thing Mark found odd was how Lauren started behaving with her phone. It used to lie on the table or kitchen counter, always face up. But now, she kept it close or flipped it face down. Once, as Mark walked by, he noticed Lauren quickly locking the screen. Another time, her phone rang, and she rushed out of the room, saying, "It's work. Maybe she's just busy?" Mark tried to reassure himself, but deep down, he was already doubting. Lauren had always been beautiful, but recently, she had started putting more effort into her appearance. She spent hours in front of the mirror, picking out clothes and doing her makeup, even when she was just going to the store. Mark tried to joke about it. "What's the special occasion today? You look amazing." "I just feel like looking better," she replied, avoiding his gaze. Mark remembered another incident. They were at a cafe together. He stepped away briefly to take a call, and when he returned, he saw Lauren hurriedly tucking her phone into her purse. "Who was that?" he asked casually. "Oh, just Sarah. She's trying to organize a bachelorette party," Lauren quickly replied. Mark nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't Sarah. They used to have dinner together every evening. But lately, Lauren often stayed late at work or went out with friends. She'd come home late, offering vague explanations. "We stayed after the meeting. There's so much work to catch up on." A few times, Mark offered to pick her up, but Lauren always declined. No, it's fine. I can get home myself." What hurt the most was how their communication had changed. Lauren used to be warm and affectionate, but now she seemed distant. Her hugs were rarer, and her kisses felt mechanical. Mark began to feel like he was no longer a part of her world. One evening, he asked, "Is everything okay? We don't talk as much anymore." Lauren just sighed and said, "I'm just tired. I've been working so much." But for some reason, her exhaustion never seemed to stop her from going out. Mark couldn't ignore how Lauren's appearance had begun to change. It happened gradually, small, subtle details that at first seemed innocent but eventually painted a troubling picture. One morning, as Lauren was getting ready for work, Mark caught a new scent. It was rich, expensive, with a hint of sweet spices. "Is that a new perfume?" Mark asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, a gift from a friend," Lauren replied without pausing. Mark found the explanation suspicious. Lauren had always chosen her perfumes herself, and she had never mentioned receiving such gifts before. The scent was bold, almost too much for an office setting. Lauren always had good taste, but her style was practical and comfortable. She used to favor jeans and classic blouses. Yet lately, Mark noticed new items in her wardrobe, things he had never seen before. One day, she left the house wearing a tight black dress that accentuated every curve. Mark, surprised, asked, "I thought you said this was just a casual meeting with colleagues?" "It is, but it's at a restaurant. Can't I look nice?" she responded with a faint smile. He also noticed her new high heels, shoes she had always deemed too uncomfortable. Mark remembered her once saying, "I love comfort. There's no point in suffering for looks." Now, it seemed, her opinion had changed. Lauren also started spending more time in front of the mirror. What used to be a quick 10-minute routine now turned into hours of perfecting eyeliner wings and selecting lipsticks that matched her perfectly. One time, when they went to the supermarket together, Mark jokingly remarked, "We're just going for milk, not to a party." Lauren simply smiled and didn't reply. Mark sat in the living room, staring into the darkness outside. Images of the Lauren he once knew flashed before his eyes, her laughter, her voice, her gestures. Not long ago, she had been his symbol of comfort and love. But now, something was different. Mark thought back to the early years of their marriage. Lauren had always been open and relaxed around him. In the evenings, they would sit on the couch wrapped in a blanket, sipping wine and watching movies. She loved resting her head on his shoulder, laughing at his jokes, and playing with his hair. She was so genuine that even the slightest hint of secrecy seemed impossible for her. She used to share every little detail of her day with him, even the most trivial ones. Imagine, today at work someone mixed up coffee with tea. I laughed all day. "Mark, I found such a cute dress today. Let's go see it together. You have to check it out." Mark remembered how they would make love late at night, after long conversations about their future. She was passionate, her desire so genuine and pure. In those moments, he felt certain that Lauren loved him just as much as he loved her. But now, everything had changed. Over the past few months, Mark began to notice how distant she had become. Lauren was more reserved, even cold. Her hugs were shorter and lacked warmth. She no longer fell asleep on his shoulder. Instead, she often went to bed before he finished watching a movie. Their conversations had become hollow, lacking the emotional connection they once shared. One evening, when he tried to initiate intimacy, she pushed his hands away and said, "I'm just tired, Mark. Let's try tomorrow, okay?" But tomorrow never came. What hurt the most was how their intimacy had changed. Lauren, once so passionate and eager, now always seemed to find a reason to avoid closeness. Mark recalled one night when she lay beside him. Her phone buzzed with a message. Lauren smiled softly, and the glow of the screen lit up her face. "Who's that?" Mark asked. "Nothing important, just Sarah," she replied, placing the phone face down on the nightstand. Mark remembered how, for the first time, his heart clenched with suspicion. Mark sat in silence, letting his thoughts drift back to a moment etched in his memory. It was nearly 3 years ago, during a summer they had spent by the ocean. They were sitting on warm sand, watching gentle waves roll onto the shore, talking about everything: life, love, the future. Suddenly, the topic turned to fidelity. Mark remembered asking, "What do you think could ruin our marriage?" Lauren looked at him with the sincerity he loved so much and said, "Betrayal. For me, it's always been unacceptable. If someone can do that, it means they've already lost respect for their partner. You have no idea how lucky I am to have you. You're so honest, so genuine. I know you would never betray me, and neither would I. That's not even up for discussion." Back then, Mark felt his heart swell with warmth. Her words were so sincere, so convincing. He never doubted her loyalty because every word, every gesture exuded love and trust. Now, sitting alone and recalling that day, Mark felt the bitter sting of irony. How could someone speak so convincingly about devotion and fidelity while building a double life? He remembered how her behavior had started to change. Lauren, who had always been so transparent with him, now avoided even simple questions. Her eyes no longer held the tenderness he once saw. Once, in a joking tone, he asked, "Do you still think cheating is something unacceptable?" Lauren paused briefly before answering, "Life isn't that simple, Mark." Her words cut through him like a knife. They sounded like an excuse, But an excuse for what? One evening, Mark returned home after a long day at work. Lauren wasn't there. She had texted that she was meeting with friends. This had become a regular occurrence, and Mark had grown accustomed to her frequent outings. But that evening, he felt something different. Not anxiety, but a strange urge to dig deeper into her life. When he walked into their bedroom, his attention was drawn to her handbag, left on the dresser. Lauren was usually meticulous and never left her things out in the open. Mark stopped in front of the bag, staring at it as though it were forbidden fruit. His heart began to pound faster. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, he told himself, but something deep inside pushed him forward. He picked up the bag and started going through its contents: wallet, keys, cosmetics. Then his hand brushed against a small black box. Mark's hands trembled as he opened the box. Inside was an elegant silver bracelet, simple yet refined, with a small heart-shaped charm. On the back of the charm, an engraving read, "4L, always yours, A." Mark couldn't take his eyes off the bracelet. His heart raced as his mind filled with questions. He read the engraving over and over, hoping it was some kind of joke or coincidence. But each time, the words "always yours" stabbed at him anew. Who is A? And why is he writing such things to my wife? He wondered. At first, Mark tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a gift from a friend or relative. Maybe it was a joke. But deep down, he knew Lauren had never worn this bracelet in his presence. She had hidden it, treating it as something that should never be seen. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the bracelet in his hands, and felt his anger begin to rise. His beloved wife, the one who once claimed she could never forgive infidelity, was now harboring such secrets. Mark tried to recall the moments when she might have received the bracelet. Was it during one of her meetings with friends? Or when she stayed late at work? Perhaps it was during one of her frequent business trips? As he continued looking through her bag, Mark came across another item: 2 tickets to a concert by a well-known artist that had taken place the previous month. The tickets were for seats in the VIP section. He immediately remembered that he had been away on a business trip that day. Mark felt his throat tighten. Who was the other person? Why hadn't Lauren even mentioned the concert? His mind and heart were in chaos. He wanted to find an explanation for Lauren's actions, hoping his suspicions were merely the result of stress and exhaustion. But the facts painted a different picture. She couldn't have done this. She loves me, Mark thought. But the voice in his head grew quieter and quieter. Mark placed the bracelet and tickets on the dresser, staring at them as though they were irrefutable evidence of betrayal. In that moment, he realized he could no longer avoid the truth. Mark couldn't sleep. His head was spinning with thoughts, and the discoveries, the bracelet and tickets, haunted him. Lauren had already returned home, smiling as usual, saying she had a great time with her friends. But her smile seemed fake, too forced. She quickly changed into her pajamas and went to bed without even asking about his day. It was yet another deviation from their once normal bedtime routine of sharing how their days went. Mark lay beside her, staring into the darkness, and felt a growing sense of unease. Why has she become like this? What is she hiding? At 3 a.m., Mark made a decision he never thought he would. When he was certain Lauren was sound asleep, Mark quietly got out of bed and carefully took her phone from the nightstand. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. His fingers trembled as he tapped the screen. It required a passcode. Holding his breath, Mark tried their wedding date. The phone unlocked. She didn't even change the password, he thought. But this small detail didn't bring him any comfort. Mark opened the messages. Most were ordinary: friends, work, even a few from himself. But one contact immediately caught his attention. A sender saved simply as A. Mark clicked on the chat and began reading. "You looked stunning today. I can't stop thinking about you. I hope you got the bracelet. I wanted it to remind you of me. When will I see you again? I can't wait any longer." Mark felt the blood in his veins run cold. He scrolled through message after message, each word stabbing him like a knife. This wasn't just a friend or a colleague. This was someone openly expressing his passion for Lauren. The messages were frequent. The most recent one had been sent just a few hours ago. "Today was incredible. Your eyes, your laugh. I already miss you. Mark searched for photos or other details to confirm his suspicions. In the attachments were pictures of Lauren, taken in places he didn't recognize. He lay back down, staring at the ceiling, struggling to process the flood of emotions consuming him. His thoughts spun around the messages he had read. Who is this Andrew? Why would she do this? And, most importantly, what do I do now? His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he heard it again. A notification. Lauren's phone had received a message. Mark couldn't resist. He picked up the phone again from where it rested beside her pillow and looked at the screen. It was another message from A. You left the bracelet with me. Don't worry, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. Mark froze. What does this mean? She was with him today? And why is he talking about the bracelet I found in her bag? It seemed this man knew more than Mark himself. This only strengthened his resolve to uncover the entire truth. Mark decided to take another step. He went to Lauren's wardrobe and began inspecting her belongings carefully. Among her clothes, he found a small locked box he had never noticed before. His intuition told him it was important. Without hesitation, he used a key from her keychain to open it. Inside, he found things he wasn't prepared for. Polaroid photos of Lauren with another man. They were laughing, hugging, and in one, she was kissing him on the cheek. An unfamiliar key engraved with room 215. A receipt for a hotel room, dated 2 weeks earlier, when she had claimed to be working late. Mark felt his heart constrict. He didn't know what shocked him more. The fact that Lauren could lie so blatantly or how expertly she had hidden it. One detail caught his attention, the name on the hotel receipt. In the guest name section, it read Andrew F. Now I have a name, Mark thought. But now he also had more questions than answers. Mark returned to the bedroom and looked at Lauren again, sleeping as if nothing was wrong. He decided he would wait for another chance to confirm his suspicions. Just as he put the box back in the wardrobe, his own phone buzzed with a notification. It was from an unknown number. You know she's not yours. She's always been mine. Mark froze. This wasn't just about the call or the items he had found. Someone wanted him to know the truth. He sat in the darkness of the bedroom, holding his phone as if it were a bomb ready to explode at any moment. On the screen, the words still glowed. You know she's not yours. She's always been mine. Destroying any remaining hope that this was some sort of misunderstanding, Mark's heart pounded so fiercely he could feel his blood pulsing in his temples. He tried to take deep breaths, but the air in the room felt heavy and suffocating. A whirlwind of questions raced through his mind. Who is writing this? Why are they so confident? Does she really belong to him? And how long has this been going on? Suddenly, vivid images flooded his thoughts. He saw Lauren in another man's arms, her soft laughter, once his alone, now given to someone else. He imagined her touching this man, looking at him with the same passion he used to feel from her. This can't be real, he muttered aloud. But even his own voice sounded weak and unconvincing. Mark recalled the bracelet engraved with "Always yours, A." Now those words fused with the message on his phone, forming a picture he was terrified to accept. He opened Lauren's conversation with A again. His eyes scanned the same lines he had already memorized. You looked stunning today. I can't stop thinking about you. When will I see you again? I want you right now. Each message was a blow. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a friendly chat. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. It was passion. It was desire. It was betrayal. Suddenly, he felt a surge of anger. Mark grabbed Lauren's phone, ready to respond to the message, but he stopped himself. What would I even say? Who am I to write to him? And would confronting him reveal the truth about Lauren? His hands still trembled as the storm inside him grew. It wasn't just anger. It was a mixture of pain, betrayal, and a profound sense of helplessness. He looked at Lauren as she slept peacefully. She lay on her side, her hair cascading gently over the pillow. She appeared so calm, so innocent, and it only fueled his fury. How could she hide something so monstrous and act as though nothing had happened? Mark glanced again at the message. She's always been mine. The words felt like a challenge. Who was this man? He thought about Andrew. But now the question wasn't just about who he was. It was about why he had chosen to write this. Was it an exposure or a taunt? I have to find out, Mark resolved. Mark picked up Lauren's phone again. He knew he risked enduring more pain, but he couldn't stop himself. The need to uncover every detail, no matter how much it might destroy him, was stronger than his fear. He opened the chat with Andrew and began scrolling through older messages, immersing himself in their conversations. With every line he read, his heart clenched tighter. Your lips. I can still taste them. I want you again, right now. Last night was unforgettable. The way you whispered my name. I can't wait for our next meeting. You look incredible in that black set. You know how to drive me crazy. Mark's hands trembled as he continued reading, even though each word felt like a dagger. The hotel room is booked. Room 215. I've prepared a surprise for you. The way you move that time makes me want you even more. Mark reread the messages several times, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and pain. He tried to recall when Lauren could have disappeared for these secret meetings. Her work meetings, catch-ups with friends, all of those excuses now seemed like obvious lies. He looked up at Lauren, still peacefully sleeping beside him. His beloved wife, the woman he thought was honest and faithful, the one who once promised never to betray him, was now living a double life. His heart shattered. Waves of images crashed over him. Lauren in a hotel room with this Andrew, smiling at him the way she used to smile at Mark. He felt an overwhelming flood of betrayal and rage. How could she? How did this even happen? He whispered to himself. As Mark scrolled through the messages, he stumbled upon a photo Lauren had sent to Andrew. It was taken in the mirror of their bedroom. Lauren stood in black lace lingerie, a set Mark had never seen before. Her posture was bold, her gaze smoldering. That moment shattered him completely. He felt his throat tighten, and his eyes filled with tears. This photo wasn't just evidence. It was betrayal in its purest form. Mark couldn't take it anymore. He put the phone back where it had been, but the storm inside him raged on. He knew there was no going back to the way things were. I need to know the full truth. She has to answer for this, he thought. With shaking hands, he picked up Lauren's phone again. His heart raced as he reopened the gallery, looking at the attachments from her chat with Andrew. At first, it was only the photos that confirmed her intimate relationship with him. But now he began to notice other details. In one photo, Lauren stood on a balcony wrapped in a thin robe. The view in the background was breathtaking. A beach, an ocean, and a sunset. But Mark had never been to such a place with her. In another, she lay on a large bed with pristine white sheets, relaxed, with a satisfied smile on her face. Her hair was spread across the pillow, and on the nightstand beside her was a glass of wine and a watch, clearly a man's. The third photo made his heart stop. Lauren wore the same black lingerie he had just seen in their messages. But what struck him even more was the writing on the mirror behind her, written in red lipstick. For you only, Andrew. Each photo was another blow. Mark felt pain and rage swirling within him. These places, these moments, this passion, none of it belonged to him anymore. Not knowing what else to do, Mark thought of his best friend, Sarah. She had always been someone he could trust, and right now, he needed her support more than ever. Mark grabbed his phone and dialed her number. She answered almost immediately, her voice calm but concerned. Mark, what's wrong? Why are you calling so late? He took a deep breath and replied, I found something I wish I'd never found. No, I know Lauren is cheating on me. The next morning, they met at a small cafe. Mark, exhausted and broken, recounted everything to Sarah. The bracelet, the hotel receipt, the messages, and finally, the photos. Sarah listened in silence, her face a mixture of anger and sympathy. That's awful, Mark, she said. But are you sure you want to dig into this further? How can I not? He replied, his voice trembling. She's my wife. How can I just ignore this? Sarah gave him a thoughtful look. Are you sure you're ready for the answers? What you find might hurt you even more. Mark felt like he was already standing on the edge of a cliff, but he knew there was no turning back. Sarah asked, Do you know who this man is? I only know his name is Andrew, Mark replied, but now I want to find him. I have to. Sarah nodded. I'll help you. But you need to be prepared. This could get worse than you can imagine. Mark knew Sarah was right, but his need to uncover the truth, to understand how this had happened, was stronger than his fear. Sarah sat across from Mark, studying his tired face. She had always known him to be strong and confident, but now he seemed like a different person, confused, broken, with a mixture of pain and rage in his eyes. As she watched him, Sarah felt something stir in her heart, something deeper than just sympathy. "Mark, do you have any idea how long this could have been going on?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark let out a deep sigh, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup in front of him. "I think about that all the time," he admitted. "Maybe it's been a few months, maybe a year or longer. I keep replaying all the moments when she seemed distant, when she hid her phone, when she avoided intimacy. And I didn't notice. I was blind." Sarah placed her hand over his. Her touch was warm, and for a brief moment, Mark felt a semblance of peace. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "People who want to lie will always find a way." Sarah felt a knot form in her chest. She had always been there for Mark, seeing how deeply he loved Lauren and how much he cared for her. But she also knew she had never completely silenced her own feelings for him. As she looked at him now, she thought, why doesn't he see that I've always been here? Why was I never brave enough to tell him how I really feel? Sarah knew this wasn't the time for her emotions, but her heart ached. Anger toward Lauren, who had so easily shattered what Mark held sacred, only made that ache sharper. Mark looked up at Sarah. He saw something in her eyes, something more than just sympathy. It was warmth, a kind of understanding and care he hadn't felt from Lauren in a long time. It confused him. "I thought Lauren and I were perfect together," he said, his voice trembling. "But now I feel like a fool. How could I not see this? How could I trust her so blindly?" Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "It's not your fault, Mark. You loved her. That's not a mistake." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Mark felt something shift. In Sarah's simple act of support, there was more sincerity and warmth than he had felt in all of Lauren's words and gestures in recent months. Silence hung between them. Not an awkward pause, but a moment where both felt the subtle shift in their connection. Mark realized that Sarah had always been more than just a friend. She had always supported him, always understood him. But now he felt a new warmth growing. He wasn't sure if it was desperation or feelings that had long been buried under his loyalty to Lauren. Sarah broke eye contact, aware that her emotions could overwhelm the moment. She didn't want Mark to feel guilty, but her heart pounded faster with each passing second. Finally, she said, "You need answers, Mark. But no matter what you find, just know I'll always be here for you." Mark smiled, a real smile, the first in days. He squeezed her hand in return. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot to me." But in his mind, images of Lauren with another man still swirled. Her laughter, her smiles, her touch, now belonging to someone else. At the same time, the thought that his best friend might be the light he needed began to pierce through the darkness of his pain. Mark couldn't sit idle any longer. The evidence he had found, the messages, the photos, the mysterious text from a stranger, left him with only one choice: to act. That evening, he called Sarah again. "I can't wait anymore," Mark said over the phone. "I need to know who this Andrew is and why he thinks Lauren belongs to him." Sarah agreed without hesitation, her voice steady and determined. "We'll figure it out together, Mark. You're not alone in this." The next day, Mark and Sarah met at a small cafe. Mark laid out everything he knew: the bracelet, the hotel receipt, the messages, and the photos. Finally, he showed Sarah the late-night message from Andrew. Sarah took Mark's phone and studied the number closely. "We can try to find out who owns this number," she suggested. Mark nodded. "But how?" "There are ways," Sarah replied. "I know someone in cybersecurity who might be able to help." Mark pulled the hotel receipt from his pocket and placed it on the table. "This is our next lead," he said. "I need to know what happened in that room." Sarah examined the document. "We could call the hotel and pretend to be her," Sarah proposed. "We might get some useful information." Mark felt that each step brought him closer to answers, but it also deepened the weight of his pain. Sarah dialed the hotel, her voice calm and professional. "Good morning, this is Lauren Porter," she said. "I'd like to confirm some details about my recent reservation for room 215. The voice on the other end responded politely. "Yes, Miss Porter. Your stay was recorded for 2 days. Would you like to book the room again?" Sarah barely managed to hide her surprise, knowing Mark was hanging on every word. "No, thank you. But could you tell me if there were any packages or messages left for me after I checked out?" she asked. "No, nothing was left," the receptionist replied. Sarah thanked them and ended the call. "She was there for 2 days," Sarah said, looking at Mark, "and that doesn't align at all with her work meetings." Mark clenched his jaw, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I need to know what they were doing there." Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady but gentle. "We'll find the truth, Mark. But you have to be ready. It might be worse than you imagine." The next step was finding out more about Andrew. Sarah contacted her cybersecurity friend, who agreed to trace the number. "It'll take some time," Sarah explained, "but we'll get him." Mark felt a wave of gratitude for Sarah's unwavering support. His anger and pain began to morph into determination. That night, Mark lay awake for hours. Memories of all the times Lauren could have been with Andrew, lying to his face, replayed in his mind. Were there signs? Why didn't I see them? His thoughts kept circling back to Sarah. Her support and calm confidence were the only things keeping him steady. Yet he also sensed that something more was growing between them, something he hadn't acknowledged before. Mark knew he couldn't wait any longer. Gathering all his courage, he decided to confront Andrew directly. Using Sarah's phone, he called Andrew, posing as an assistant from a law firm. To his surprise, Andrew agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a cafe near Andrew's office. Mark arrived early, choosing a seat in the farthest corner, and waited. Every passing minute felt like an hour. Andrew arrived on time. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an air of confidence that immediately set Mark on edge. This wasn't someone who could be easily intimidated. "You're Mark?" Andrew asked, sitting across from him. "Yes," Mark replied curtly. "You want to talk about Lauren, right?" Andrew said, a slight smile forming on his face. Mark's chest tightened. This was it, the moment that would either provide clarity or plunge him further into darkness. Mark took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I want the truth. How long has this been going on? What is between you two?" Andrew looked at him with mild sympathy, but there was also a challenge in his eyes. "It started about a year ago. We met at a conference. Your wife, she's not who you think she is." "What do you mean?" Mark's voice trembled. "She told me that your marriage hasn't made her happy in a long time," Andrew said. "That you've grown cold, that you don't look at her the way you used to. She said you don't appreciate her." Those words cut through Mark's heart like a knife. He could feel his anger rising, overtaking the pain. "That's a lie. I've always supported her, always loved her." Andrew raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not saying it's true, but that's what she told me, and I believed her." Andrew continued, his tone steady. "She said she needed someone who could make her feel alive. We started seeing each other. She was passionate. She knew what she wanted, and she took it." Mark clenched his fists, barely managing to hold himself back. "She loved the secrecy," Andrew went on. "We met at hotels, in different places. She even suggested we take a vacation together, but I refused." Mark recalled the photos he had seen on her phone and realized these weren't just words. Andrew paused, then said something that finally broke Mark completely. "Sometimes, she said she wanted to leave you, but then she always said there was one thing stopping her." "What was it?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Your money," Andrew replied flatly, without a hint of emotion. Mark felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Mark stood up without saying another word. He stared at Andrew, searching for something, anything, that might ease the weight he felt, but there was nothing. "I don't know what you're going to do next," Andrew said, "but I'm done with this. She means nothing to me anymore." Mark looked him in the eye and replied, "She means nothing to me anymore either." Mark was about to leave, but Andrew's words stopped him. "Wait," Andrew said, his voice sounding serious for the first time. "You should know everything. Lauren wasn't just playing me. She was playing you too. Mark turned back and sat down. He looked at Andrew, his gaze filled with anger and pain. But now his heart demanded answers. Andrew took a slow breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. Lauren is a master manipulator. She knew how to make me feel needed, how to convince me that I was the one giving her everything she wanted. How exactly? Mark asked, his voice sharp and tense. She never said things outright, Andrew explained. It was always hints. She'd say things like, "You make me feel alive," or "with you, I forget all my problems." She knew how to create the illusion that I was her hero, the one saving her from her dull life. Mark remained silent, but his chest tightened. He was starting to realize those words were likely just part of a game. "She told me you were a good man, but that you weren't the same as you used to be," Andrew continued. "She assured me that you didn't notice her anymore, that you had stopped appreciating her. But do you know what's interesting?" "What?" Mark replied through gritted teeth. "She never wanted to end things with you," Andrew said. "She called you her stability. You were her guarantee." "Guarantee of what?" Mark asked coldly. "Guarantee of security," Andrew explained. "She said you provided for her, that you were stable and reliable. And I was her escape, the passion she claimed she was missing." Mark felt rage rising inside him. His wife had been living two lives, using him as her foundation and Andrew as her thrill. "She always said exactly what I wanted to hear," Andrew went on. "But in the end, I realized it wasn't me controlling the situation. It was her. She was playing both of us." Mark lowered his head, his breathing deep and heavy. Memories flooded his mind. Lauren smiling at him, telling him she loved him, excusing her late work nights. "How could you not see this?" Andrew asked. Mark lifted his head, his eyes blazing with fury. "Because I trusted her," he replied. "I never thought the person I loved could do something like this." Andrew sighed. "Mark, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I didn't want it to end like this. But you need to understand. It wasn't just you she deceived. She fooled me too." "What do you mean?" Mark asked. "She cheated on me too," Andrew admitted. "A few weeks ago, I found out she had started talking to someone else. Someone new was already in her orbit." Those words shattered Mark completely. This wasn't just betrayal. It was Lauren's way of life. Mark stood, his face calm, but his eyes burned with determination. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "But now, I'll handle her myself." Andrew nodded. "Good luck. You deserve better." Mark left the cafe, feeling a storm of pain and anger churning inside him. He knew it was time to end this chapter, but he had to do it in a way that took back control of his life. Late that evening, Mark returned home. His thoughts were a chaotic mess, but beneath it all, he felt a strange calm. The meeting with Andrew had laid everything bare. Now he knew the truth, a truth that hurt more than a knife in the back. But he was ready. Lauren sat in their living room, sipping a glass of red wine. She had no idea that tonight everything would change. "We need to talk," Mark said, his voice cold and distant. Lauren looked up, her expression surprised, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course. What's going on?" Mark sat down across from her, locked eyes with her, and placed the hotel receipt, printed photos, and a copy of the conversation with Andrew on the table. Lauren's face went pale. Her hand holding the glass trembled slightly. "What's this?" Her voice was weaker than usual. "This is all I need to know about you," Mark said. "How long have you been playing this game, Lauren? How long have you been cheating on me while using me as your guarantee?" She opened her mouth to respond, but Mark raised his hand to stop her. "Don't lie. I've already spoken to him. I know about Andrew. I know everything." Lauren abruptly set the glass down on the table. Her voice shifted, becoming more aggressive. "And what do you want, Mark? Do you want to judge me? You're the one to blame for all of this." "Blame?" Mark asked, narrowing his eyes. "Yes, blame," she snapped. "You've always been so focused on work, on stability. And me? I felt like I was just another piece of furniture to you. And that's why you decided to find someone else?" His voice was laced with sarcasm. "Someone who was also married, but somehow had time for passionate evenings?" Lauren went quiet. She knew her excuses wouldn't work anymore. Mark stood up and walked toward the door. You know, I always believed in us. I thought we were a team. But you destroyed that. You chose lies over honesty. You chose lust over love. Lauren couldn't respond. She just stared at him silently, tears glistening in her eyes. Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer, Mark said. We won't be a team anymore. He left the house, feeling a heavy weight lift from his shoulders. The pain was still there, but now he knew. This chapter was over. He called Sarah. Her voice was warm, as always. How did it go? She asked. It's over, he replied. Thank you for being there. I'll always be here, she said softly. Mark smiled. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a chance at a new life. And this time, he would choose someone who would choose him without hesitation. Sometimes life gives us the harshest lessons to help us understand who we truly are and what we deserve. Betrayal isn't just the loss of trust. It's an opportunity to start over. And most importantly, to find someone who will never betray you. Do you agree? Share your thoughts below. How do you feel about how the main character was treated?